Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris Jenkins. I'm the Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy for HealthLink Advisors, and I'll serve as the moderator today. Also with me is my co-host, Mark Pasquale. Mark is one of our leaders. He leads our digital practice as well, which includes enterprise imaging and overall governance. So looking forward to today's conversation. Before we jump in, just a couple housekeeping items. So one thing is you'll notice there's a chat, and if you have questions, please go ahead and just enter your questions in the chat. We'll make every effort possible to answer your questions, but given time constraints, if we're not able to do so, we'll make sure that we follow up via email. But definitely want as much engagement as possible. This is really an open discussion, and I think the intent here is for all us to learn from some of the challenges that many organizations face, and it's important to have that engaging conversation from the participants as well. Before we get into the details, let me give you a little bit of background on HealthLink Advisors. We're an independent healthcare advisory firm, and we deliver strategy through execution for our healthcare partners. We have a very diverse team of industry leaders, many with Big Four experience, and many with tenure working in healthcare positions, including clinical, business, and IT roles in large complex health systems. Some of our key offerings, we get focused on digital strategy. That includes IT strategy, organizational strategy, and operations. We do a lot of platform assessments and selections, both ERP, EHR, and enterprise imaging, as well as some IT sourcing. And then we also have a care innovation arm, very focused on the care realignment, care innovation to change the differing healthcare delivery models today. And we have an Epic Center of Excellence as well that we stay very focused on. And the last couple I'll mention is business systems management. We call that our ERP offering, which includes managed services, and then program and project management. I'll end there is we're driven by our culture. We have a great passion for improving the healthcare community. We all have stories around why we're doing this and why we've been doing it for so long. And we have a desire to exceed our customers' expectations. So we really enjoy the work we do. We enjoy things like we're doing today, talking to some of our great partners about challenges they faced and how they're getting through it, and share stories with many organizations. So with that said, let's get started. So this is series number 2. We do a digital series every summer, and this is our second one. And we'll have a third one coming up on ERP in the future. This one is focused on enterprise imaging, and it's really around enterprise partnership and governance, and just how do you evolve an enterprise imaging strategy? How do you get buy-in from the organization? And then how do you get it to the very end of actually delivering on that strategy? So that's what we're here to do today. And I'm very humbled and honored to have with us one of our great partners, Pam Austin. Pam is a Senior VP and CIO at Ballad Health, and she's here to discuss kind of their journey on enterprise imaging. So Pam, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. And could you give us a little bit of a background of, overview of Ballad Health and your role within the organization?
Yes, and hello, everyone. It's really an honor for me to be able to share this information with you. HealthLink Advisors is a great partner for us, and I'm happy to share this information. Ballad Health, we are in Northeast Tennessee. If you look at the map, we're all the way in the corner. Southwest Virginia, Northwestern North Carolina, and Eastern Kentucky is our service area. We have 20 hospitals, 29 counties across the region. We have a lot of rural health in our area. Ballad Health came into existence in 2018, so we're 5 years young, as a result of a merger between Mountain States Health Alliance and Wellmont Health System. And we have a monopoly on healthcare in our region. So, and I'm looking at some stats here to share with you that I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget. Ballad was formed under a state action immunity in compliance with federal antitrust law. So we are governed, if you will, by the state of Virginia and the state of Tennessee through a cooperative agreement in Virginia and what's called a COPA, or a Certificate of Public Advantage, in Tennessee. So quarterly, and in fact, tomorrow, we meet with the states to go over where we stand with the initiatives that they required of Ballad. So it's very tightly scrutinized and governed by the states. They are very serious about the merger and how we deliver care in our area. Ballad Health has approximately 13,000 team members, and again, I said 20 hospitals. Let me give you a couple more things. We service about a population of 950,000 people in an 8,600 square mile radius. So I can give you way more stats about who Ballad is, but just know that we are 5 years young and serving that population and a lot of rural healthcare. And I'm Senior Vice President, Chief Information Officer. I've been in this position for approximately maybe 3.5 years. Soon as COVID happened, I got this position like February of 20. And it's been definitely been a journey. And I'm looking forward to sharing our experience on enterprise imaging with all of you. So I have right at 30 years of healthcare IT experience. And I think that's it, Chris. We'll sum it up there.
That's a great overview. And, huge population of patients that you all are responsible for and delivering care. And I think that really kind of ties in great with what we're going to talk about today. Is there's a lot of imaging services that are needed in your general service area, so it's
Yes.
One of your priorities. So if we think about the merger and acquisition 5 years ago, and it takes a long time for an organization to come together as a system, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the merger and acquisition in the very beginning, can you walk us through the process that you all went through to determine, what do you do first? How do you prioritize the systems to come together? And was it a consolidation effort? And where did the enterprise imaging fall into that process?
Yes, absolutely. So February 1st, 2018, we formed, right? And one of the first things we had to focus on was the infrastructure. How do we join the networks together? How do we give everybody a shared email address, right? Because we're in two different data centers, we're still two different systems, right? So we started out on that journey. How do we blend the technology? Along with that was Wellmont had Epic as the EMR, we had Cerner Sorian. So we had, based on the COPA, 3 years to get to a common platform for each EHR. So we went through due diligence with both of those vendors. We didn't go out and do a whole selection, looking at multiple vendors. We looked at the two incumbents together. Which one's the best for Ballad, right? So we selected Epic within those first probably 4 months of the organization's inception. And we started out on that journey to move Mountain States off of Cerner Sorian to Epic. So that took a couple years. We went live in June 1st of 2020 at our ambulatory clinics, and that's around 200 locations. And then October 1st of the same year we converted 12 hospitals off of Sorian to Epic. So those were the first things. Then as part of this merger, we did an analysis, what we call application rationalization. How many applications does Wellmont have? How many did Mountain States have? Let's combine them together all in one list to determine, now we've got duplicate and triplicate systems. So in there, enterprise imaging obviously is at the top, the ERP is at the top, the EMR is at the top of the priorities for moving off these legacy systems to a common platform. So that's how we kind of started. That's how we prioritize enterprise imaging, was right there at the top, because these are the critical infrastructure that run the business, right? Epic and Infor, our ERP, those two together. And then you have the imaging on top of that, with several other applications that are prioritized in there. But that's how we prioritize the imaging piece of that, because we had 3 legacy PACS solutions. So we really, with pending end of life dates for all 3 of them. So we were faced with are we going to upgrade all three to the next version, which, provided opportunity for a VNA on all three of them, or are we going to pick one of them, or are we going to choose a totally different solution? So we set out we reviewed the three that we had, and then we went to market with an RFP. We decided then the investment you make in an enterprise imaging is critical and it's costly, right? So you want to make sure you're making the right decision. We wanted something to compare the other three against. So we really had narrowed it down. So we set the three aside and we went out to the industry and did an RFP to see what other options there were. And we did not choose one of the three. We chose a different route. But that was based on, which we'll get into more details about that. But that's how we prioritized our enterprise imaging from the inception of Ballad, along with the other critical success factors beyond the technology.
Excellent. So it sounds like the COPA was a big driver in EHR coming first, because you had some criteria you had to meet with COPA. And I know there's still ongoing criteria with COPA. It's not just a quick 1 year and done. It's a multi-year oversight of that merger. If you think about making the decision around ERP, HR, and enterprise imaging, I think it's important to talk about initially when you merge, you bring in leaders together, right? From all different walks of careers and positions. And if you think of how you started with engaging the enterprise leaders in governance where it was then, how involved were the groups to say, all right, we want to do enterprise imaging after ERP or vice versa? And then when you get to RFP, if you think about how engaged were they in the RFP? So who did you actually bring into some of those discussions, and what are some of the challenges to getting consensus around what to go do and when?
Yeah, so obviously at the beginning of the merger, the EHR was the number one, right? And that came about from our CEO, just from the merger. We had a short time to get onto one platform. So that came first. ERP came at the same time, really, because we needed to get everybody on the same payroll system. So those two took parallel paths, if you will, because we wanted to get everybody on the same payroll system by the beginning of 2019, if that was possible, and I believe it was, if I recall correctly. And then from there, we put together that application rationalization list, and this was in 2019. So we'd converted the ERP. We were on track with the EHR because we'd already selected Epic. We've got the project going, we've got the timeline going, got all these things. And then we took that list, and I was really the driver of it, if you will, from a technology standpoint, looking at that list. Okay, we have three of these different systems, and really PACS was at the top of, we've got three solutions here. And radiology is very critical to the organization, right? And to the radiologists. So I pulled together a group of our leaders from the executive vice president level and suggested we now need to start on this enterprise imaging solution, because we have three legacy systems that have end of life pending right here. We don't want to upgrade these. We don't want to continue investing in these three. We need to get to one solution. So I recommended back to the organization that we pull together a group of folks, which included radiology, radiologists, IT, and some of the operational leaders, not just in radiology, because I call it, you want all the ologies. You want ophthalmology, cardiology. You want everything you can use a VNA for, right? So we needed to take that next step. We had to prepare a budget. We had to prepare a timeline. We had a lot of factors around that. So we pulled together that governance group after I got approval from the EVPs. Yes, we need to go forward with this solution once they saw, and I honestly can't remember what all was on there, but radiology was on my mind as one of the priorities, because we have what I call enterprise solutions across the organization: Epic, Infor, the PAC solution, things like that, that we wanted to take advantage of. So I explained to the organization always, and this is a key thing, these projects are not IT owned. IT doesn't own radiology. The business has to own radiology. So the governance group that was pulled together came about from my recommendation from an IT perspective, and it was approved by the operations folks and the EVP that's ultimately over radiology. So we had good input from the business and from the operations side as to who was going to be on the selection committee, who's on the governance committee, who, all the way around. And I will tell you that the governance and the support from the organization is critical. It doesn't matter what you're implementing, but having the voice of that customer from the radiologist who's actually going to use an enterprise imaging, and having their voice and having them actually on the committee has been a critical success factor for us. We haven't always done that, but I thought, why not include the very people who are going to use this solution, and that's the radiologists. So that's kind of, I don't know if that answers it fully, but that's how that was our approach.
No, it does. And to be able to do that early on, right after merger and acquisition, because there's a lot of differing processes, a lot of different personalities, you have to learn one another. To be able to pull those groups together was critical and challenging, I'm sure. And no, I think that answered the question, exactly. That group was very helpful.
Yeah, and another key thing to that, what you're saying on it was difficult and challenging because everybody wants their own thing, right? But it was what we did is brought them together, and this is not about each individual and here's what I want, but what is best for the patients, what's best for the organization, what are your critical success factors, what must you have in a system, and we had them write that down. And by doing that exercise was difficult for them, but it proved to be a success factor for us.
That's perfect. You actually answered part of my next question, Pam, which is really good. Which is how did you define what were some of the business drivers to go when you developed your enterprise imaging strategy? The apparatus right there. That's a given. You have three. You got to figure out how to do that. But you kind of mentioned some of those things, the business drivers, and developing that. And when we think of enterprise imaging now, it's changed a lot, even since 5 years ago. Enterprise imaging, some people look at it holistically instead of a siloed version of the VNA of PACS and all that. So we look at it holistically as PACS, the VNA, workflow manager, and universal viewer. And how many of the ologies can you pull into at least what appears to be one system, so you can truly streamline operations, you can streamline support, and in the end, you provide better patient outcomes and patient experience and clinician experience. So you mentioned a few of those things that were important to you, but if you take a step back and think of how you define the strategy through that group, you mentioned a couple of drivers, but in your mind, what were some of those key drivers that you needed to go solve for the business to drive better outcomes?
Yeah, ultimately it comes down to patient care. How are we caring for our patients, right? What solution is out there? If you step back, you don't just pick okay, I want to go with this one. You look back and see, okay, what is going to be the best for us long term? How is this technology going to fare a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? What is the strategy of the partner you're choosing? What is their success factor? When you select that solution, is it going to be here a year from now, 2 years from now? What is the future going to hold for what you're purchasing? But really, it boiled down to patient care and looking at the technology that we had in place and removing that from the decision making. Right? What is it we're trying to solve for here? What is the business driver? Like you said, what are we trying to solve for? And it was really removing those three end-of-life solutions out, and let's look at truly what are we trying to solve? What do we want radiology to be? How do we want to care for the patients? How do you want to use any kind of automation efforts that come along with a product like that? So a lot, I mean, honestly, it was driven around the merger and looking at
Yeah.
that application rationalization. But if you step back from that, it's looking long-term at the technology. What is that partner going to provide to you a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Are you going to have to replace everything you have in 2 years from now because they've changed something that you don't know about? And a lot of that is investigating the partner you're going with. And then how are we caring for patients? And how does it disrupt or change the workflow for radiology? And how do we incorporate all of the other ologies as we talked about there? And what does that look like for those solutions? And how do you care for patients in those different spaces? How does this look? And then from a digital perspective, how can we use the solution in a digital space? So there wasn't one factor to this, it's multi factors that got us here.
Good. That's a great approach. I think understanding long-term and scalability, right? You're modernizing,
Yeah.
because my understanding of your platforms are older, right? And it's not uncommon with a lot of organizations. You have, older PAC systems that are challenging to support and don't offer some of the modern functionality that some of the newer systems do, even some of the existing systems, right? That require an upgrade. So I think the fact that you're looking forward long-term was critically important. You mentioned something else that we always see is a variation in workflow. And I'm not going to say standardized workflows, but it's reduced variation in workflows. And by modernizing a system and, doing and consolidating, you're going to simplify your support model, because like many organizations I know, you're probably challenged with having resources. You can't support 3 PAC systems and be very efficient doing that. So you're going to simplify your environment as much as you can, and you're going to help the organization reduce variation in their workflows. Now that in and of itself, the governance that you put in place will be helpful, because I think you mentioned at the beginning, it's not an IT project. It's not put technology in and it's going to solve all your problems.
Right.
I'm assuming that you leverage governance also to say there's process changes that need to come with this. So you need to understand that. And if that's the case, do the radiologists and the clinicians own that process today?
Yes, and that that's a change management from beginning to end, educating everyone on what that means. And we use a phrase called, we don't pave cow paths, right? So we don't want to just take this solution we have and repeat it into these 3 different processes you have over here. What is the process that comes with what we're implementing? What change happens there? And managing the change management, which is the people and process, right, is 90% of the job in implementing anything, right, that we do. It's helping people understand this is the way we're going, the way you do something now is going to change, and here's how it's changing, and here's why it's changing, and why it needs to change, because you're not using this tool any longer, and we're modernizing. So it's not taking people's jobs away, and that's something that people fear, right? So you have to, the way you communicate early and often in a project like this is critical, even with the radiologists. So they understand, they see the system, they see how this workflow is going to go, and they started providing input, which was wonderful for us. They were like, oh, well, we can do this. Oh, we can do this, or we can do this. So we put back on the radiology department and the radiologists, here's how this system works. Here's how it's going to work in your workflow, because at the end of the day, you all picked this solution because you thought it was going to work better for you in your space, and it will. But you have to manage that change and make sure the scope is narrow and you can get the project implemented before you take off and do any kind of optimization efforts.
Yeah, excellent. Mark, I think you had a couple questions as well.
Yeah, a lot of the, thanks very much. A lot of the vendors have focused over the last couple of years on migration to cloud. And as a matter of fact, the majority of implementations today have really been going towards that. I think most of the vendor contracts over the last couple of years have really emphasized a cloud infrastructure, whether it's primary or potentially for a business continuity or even DR type environment. And Pam, if you were describing very nicely how your focus was to bring these health systems together on a single enterprise imaging platform. You had 3 end-of-life systems. When you were going through that process, how much did cloud play a factor in your overall selection process?
Well,
I should say cloud capabilities of the vendors you were looking at.
right. So at the end of the day, we are on premise, right? So we didn't do a cloud strategy or a cloud option with the solution that we selected. It was discussed, but it was more so discussed from a DR perspective. That's something longer term that we're looking at doing. Right now, we have the failover capability, but it's on premise. But part of our long-term strategy from that perspective is we're looking at changing our whole DR strategy around multiple technologies that have that capability. So there are some enterprise imaging solutions you have to really look under the covers that don't always have the cloud capability with the technology. So it was discussed, but it was more so discussed from a DR perspective. But we ultimately didn't go that route. We are on premise for both data centers.
Thank you. And then through the process and bringing governance together and looking at the different products, as you know, AI is really booming in our industry. Enterprise imaging services is no exception to that. I was curious as to what the organization is looking at from an AI perspective going forward, whether it is potentially looking at expanding work list triage capabilities, detection. A lot of the vendors are doing brain and lung early detection. They're even doing diagnosis now. Of course, we've got natural language processing, which has been available for a while, but it's now being expanded through AI algorithms as well. So in that AI space, just curious as to what your customer base is potentially looking at, what they're excited about, what might be early in your evaluation process. I know this is a long-winded question, but there are so many vendors that are out there, and there are so many different things going on with the core imaging vendors trying to partner with some of these folks as well as write their own internal algorithms. Just curious as to what your organization is looking at and what might be early in your horizon on leveraging AI technologies.
Yeah, so from an enterprise imaging perspective, I'll start there. We are just early on in having that conversation. In fact, at 2:30 or 3 o'clock today, I have a meeting with our partner, our enterprise imaging partner, about this very topic on what they have to offer, that the models are already developed. We don't have to purchase anything else. It comes with this solution. And then having that conversation back with radiology on what are the use cases? What do we want? Where do we want to start first? We've just barely broached the subject with AI around radiology. Now, as a whole, as Ballad as a whole, we are at the place of developing a policy, because there are HIPAA and legal components to AI. So we're starting there, and we're just at the tip, right? We use some AI with Epic around sepsis, for example. So they have their solution. Our ERP partner has their solution for that in. So it's really going to be use case specific, but we haven't really gotten into here's exactly how we're going to, we want AI, but we don't really know what that means. So I've put together some education materials really to educate the organization on what AI means to us, and here's how we will use it in our environment. And there could be very specific use cases that are outside of the realm of enterprise imaging or ERP or EHR that will come along, but we've not gotten there yet. So IT kind of owns that technology, but we're working back with our clinical leadership to better understand how that technology works and how do we want to use it in that space. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah, it's something that we're seeing across the industry in the clients that we work with. They're in that evaluation stage.
Yeah.
Just like Ballad, a lot of discovery of what AI really is for the enterprise imaging environment. There was a recent American College of Radiology article where I think it said that around 2015, which wasn't that long ago, there wasn't really any use of AI in the imaging space. It's grown to about 30%, and they expect it to be up to 50% by sometime next year, which is really something. 50% utilization across the health industry. So it's definitely booming. A lot of folks are in this, and they're doing a lot of what you're doing right now, and that is evaluating what it really is, what it means to our organization. And I think you said it really well earlier. How does this align with our goal of improving patient care? And what can AI do for that? And that's really a great focus.
And you have to really understand, like, even with the models that are created today, let's say with any of our partners, you have to understand how they operate. You got to look under the covers of that, because you want to eliminate bias, right? So you have to really understand how that algorithm is working, because ultimately you're caring for a patient down at the end of this, that you want to make sure that this technology produces good information, right? To make decisions from, and it's accurate.
Yeah, that's a good point, Pam. And the interpretation of that information, you can't take it completely at face value, right? There's still the human interaction you have to validate it, which is going to remain important. You know, Mark, as you all were talking, and Pam, I thought of one thing. RSNA is just around the corner, so you're going to have a lot of people coming back with asks for AI or whatever it is. So, what are your thoughts internally around governance, and are you going to leverage governance to kind of oversee AI in general throughout, whether it's enterprise imaging or anything else?
Yes, absolutely. So a couple things. We have it's a newly, I'm going to say it's reimagined, reformed, whatever you want to call it, technology steering committee. And that committee is ultimately where this is going to funnel up to say, here are the decisions that need to be made on AI. So that's the governance group. And that governance group includes business, clinical, executives, marketing, strategy, and IT. It's run by my boss, actually, the committee is. And that's the governance group. We don't need to create another governance group, because the same people would be in that governance group. AI, RPA, those kind of automation efforts are technologies, like I mentioned earlier, owned by IT. So if we're going to automate something using that kind of technology, we would be working back with the business to say, these are the use cases. We take that up. And also compliance and legal are a part of that committee as well. And I mean, I've even looked to see, a lot of people don't even have a policy in their organization written. It's so new. So we're looking not just governance, who's going to govern this, but I'm the point of contact for it. So I want to do the education back to the organization on, here's the governance group, here's the process we're going to use through our PMO or through any implementation of these solutions. The next steps and the use cases come about from, let's say, our ERP or our EHR. Here's what we're using in this technology. And then we funnel that up, sometimes for decision-making, sometimes for awareness, because there are levels in the organization that can make those kinds of decisions. I mean, you see a lot of this in the revenue cycle, but we are educating the organization of what's already out there that we already have, and making them aware it's not something new. It's just now we can do something different because the technology has advanced.
Mhm. Yeah, good. It's a lot of organizations are faced with this. It's and it's not necessarily a shiny new object. It's real, but
It is.
and I think there's a lot of value that's can be achieved through it. But you're right, you have to manage it correctly. Let's fast forward a bit to today. We've talked a lot about the drivers and getting to your strategy, getting through the COPA merger. So today with enterprise imaging, I know you're in the process of replacing those 3 systems. Let's just talk about some, where you are today with that process and how you've changed, or if governance has changed for the implementation of the system and some of the challenges that you faced that you had to overcome there.
Yeah, so we are in process of the implementation. Our governance group has not changed. We thankfully had no turnover there. So it's the same group that we started with the RFP, the selection, all of those things. It's the same group. But it more so is the change management and keeping people focused on the scope of what we're implementing. Because all of a sudden, you've got to get off of these 3 systems, and this is the scope to do that. But now we want all of these things to go at the same time, which extends your timeline. So keeping people focused on this is what we're implementing. So that'd be one thing. I start from the beginning. We're not changing the scope. We have got to get off of these systems, and this is how we're going to do that. That's one thing. But really overall, it's keeping everybody focused, because we have so many projects focused on getting that solution implemented, and managing off of the other solutions is really where we are today. It's a pull on resources all the way around, because the same resources still support those 3 solutions and are part of implementing the new solution. So it's resources are scarce anywhere in IT if you look across, but we've been able to manage through. HealthLink has helped us a lot in this process. And I mean, honestly, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but you all have been a part of the success that we've had, pushing forward to keep this solution moving forward and keeping everything managed, escalations, and dealing with the issues as they come along, and communicate often as you can to set expectations, because the radiologist saw this thing out here, but this is the thing you're getting. And there's sometimes misunderstandings or misconceptions about how things really work. And it's just the communication all the way around.
Yeah, appreciate that. And you're right. It's a transparency around what you bought versus what's being implemented, or what you thought you bought. And a lot of times it's pretty common, regardless of the system, what you see, your mind creates this great picture of this is what I'm getting, but sometimes it's a little bit less than that. Sometimes it's more. So, I think the radiologists, my understanding, they're still very involved in seeing the system. They're still involved in understanding challenges that are faced. Is that true? They're still engaged, and you're keeping them very aware of where you are in the process.
They are very engaged, and I think it has been eye-opening for them. I think it's been an education exercise for them, because you don't normally have an enterprise imaging replacement on a regular basis, right, where you pull the radiologists in. So it's been a learning. It's been good for them. It's been good for us to learn from them and understand how we need to engage further with them. It's been good from an IT perspective to hear their issues and concerns, but also to help mitigate what they saw that they think they're getting might be in 4 releases down the road. It's coming, but it's going to be a year out or 2 years out, and managing that. And they understand that. They're understanding that more and more. And quite honestly, it has been great having radiologists. You can't do a system implementation without them. I mean, I would highly advise against that. Have them on your governance, because the decisions that are made at the governance level include them. So
Yeah.
if you ever have to go back and say, okay, you were part of the decision on this, and we haven't had to do that yet, but I wouldn't do this again. I wouldn't do it without them.
Good.
They've been very engaged.
All right. Let me halt for a second and see if I don't see any questions in the chat, but if of those participants that are on, if you have questions, feel free to ask. If you don't, that's fine as well. If you think of something afterwards, you can always send an email out and we can answer it there. Mark, any additional thoughts?
I just think that some of the things Pam was just going through, just really spot on from an implementation perspective, and getting that enterprise engagement, getting all the key stakeholders in place, going through all the decisions that are made as you go through the implementation process are really critical. But really just making sure you have good communication. Everyone has every stakeholder has a seat at the table. It just makes for a real collaborative install. And I know that's the way it's been done at Ballad, not just with this, but with all of your major implementations over the last several years, and which has really helped you be so successful in achieving what you have done, especially over the last recent 2-3 years.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mark. Pam, if you think forward, and you include the pandemic in there, which really halted a lot of progress. So 5 years ago, the merger, the pandemic took at least 1.5 years away. But since then, you've replaced your EHR, you've replaced your ERP, and you're in the process of consolidating your PACS environments. That is significant. That's a significant undertaking over what I'll say is roughly a 3-year period. So kudos to you and the team. Thanks for attending today and providing insight in what, your journey, where you are, and I know it's going to continue. Any closing thoughts from you, or any advice to those that are on a similar journey?
Yeah, I would say this: governance is key. Communicate as much as you can. Involve the radiologist, the radiology, and remind people it's not an IT project, right? Because sometimes we think it is, and just realize that it's not. You're following the PMO process, right? You really follow that, but keeping that scope narrow, keeping everybody's expectation on the same page, are recipes to help you be successful. It's not everything, but those are some keys that we learned. And the communication, we actually have a person from our marketing department part of this group, so that they can help craft the communication that we need to send out as well. So just got to hang in there, but those are critical success factors. Excellent.
Well, thank you, Pam. And if there are no questions, then I think, we left a few minutes for questions. Kind of closing thoughts as well. There are a lot of organizations with some older PACS environments, very, very complex. A lot of times we go into organizations, we'll find 40 plus audiology solutions out there, many of which don't talk to one another. So, just follow a very disciplined approach to understanding what you have in your environment, what your opportunities are to replace it, and the real reason of why you want to go do that. So if there's any assistance needed, this is one of our key focus areas within Healthing Advisors. Please reach out. We'll be happy to just have a conversation with you. I think what Pam talked about today was great. Kind of helps organizations think through what they need to do in the future. So thank you for attending. Appreciate the time. Pam, thank you so much for that great insight. Mark, thanks for co-hosting.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.